Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark DiCarlo. Tonight, my guest is County Attorney Laura Garza Jimenez, and I guess part-time artist. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, how long you been County Attorney?
Approximately about 29 years. I'm sorry. County attorney, as an employee of the county, 28 years. As of county attorney, it's been 12
28 years. So pretty soon you'll get the big pension. I would assume like 30-year pension or something. Right?
I think I'm at that age where I can retire, but really we still have our son in the university. It's not a good idea. No, we're probably going to be working the rest of our lives.
Well, do you have, I guess if you have some good hobbies or something, or you got enough money, you could put. Well, you're an artist, right? Tell us. I've seen you're a friend of mine on Facebook, and I've seen your art, and I'm no artist, or I don't have a good point of reference, but I mean, I don't like folk art generally, but I do like the Mexican folk art, and I thought your art was very good. And is that what it is, Mexican folk art?
Yes, it's cultural. Yes, it's Mexican folk art. Yes.
And this is a piece that you brought?
Yes.
And what do you call this piece?
La Piñata. And I was exhibited in New York in November of 2014.
Did you have your own show? Or
No, it was a group show. And it was with our friend and leader, Grace Barraza Vega. She was the one that coordinated everything. And so it was a group of us.
So you went up to New York?
Yes.
All right. So was this for sale, this piece?
Yes, it was.
How much is this for sale for?
To tell you the truth,
you don't know?
I don't.
But what does your art usually sell for? I mean,
this one I think is $600.
Oh, okay.
It's
so
reasonable.
How long does this take you to paint? We'll figure it out per hour how much. No.
Actually, it doesn't take me that long to actually paint. This probably took me about 2 hours, but after that, it's all about the details. So, I work at it a little bit longer. So I would say maybe 4 hours. So
what was your experience? Let's see. How long were you in New York for this art exhibit?
We were there a couple of days. The show, it was just one. Well, the show was for about a couple of weeks, but we had a reception. It was one particular day. So we stayed a few days. It was a great experience. That was my first time in New York, and of course, this was an excellent experience.
I haven't been there since I was a boy. I understand it's changed greatly since Giuliani. It's I've heard like Manhattan and all that's very materialistic, very money-oriented, etc. What was your impression? Did you go to any shows or anything? Did you
Yes,
enjoy it?
We were able to go to one, but I did not plan in advance, and so it was very difficult to get in there to those shows because they're all sold out. But I felt like a little kid in a candy store, to tell you the truth. I've been many places, but I had never been into New York, and it's the city that never sleeps. It really is.
Well, I've always, and this is my impression, I've said it many times. Everybody says, "Oh, Texas is like a different country," and whatever, California. But I've always thought that East Coast, New York, New Jersey, D.C. area was really like a different place.
It really felt that way.
Yeah,
I went undergrad in Houston, Texas, which is kind of like a melting pot, but it didn't feel like that. It was totally different. Yeah, very different.
It is different. It's I need to visit one of these days. I haven't been up there since I was a little boy. I think that certain parts of New York, they have the crime problem taken care of. So I'm going to your homepage to get some ideas for the show, and you have been on before.
Yes, thank you.
And domestic violence. Okay, let's talk about the domestic violence. They're talking, I do criminal defense work, and I tried 2 cases last year, and they were both domestic violence cases. So I guess it's a growth industry, just joking, for the criminal defense field. What does your office have to do? Why does a county attorney have domestic violence safety plan on its website, guide to filing an application for protective order, etc.? What do you have to do with what is perceived as a domestic violence problem?
Under the law, the Office of County Attorney is constitutionally created, but my duties are outlined by statute. And according to the statute, I have a duty to represent applicants or people that have been abused to seek a protective order. And so we do provide that service to the public, and it's free, of course. And there's a process in place. We interview them, and we speak with them, and we look at all the elements in the law and to see if it, in fact, it satisfies the law, and we proceed in obtaining a protective order on their behalf. And so this last year, it's been, there's been a lot of murders, and all of them have been associated with domestic violence. So it is a very serious problem right now. And in addition to what I do, or through my staff, or with my staff, I also belong to a ad hoc committee, which is 3 people, myself and Lisa Hernandez and Dr. Nancy Vera. And what we do is we try to bring awareness to the public, and we assist the women's shelter with that situation. And being that I'm the artist as well as Lisa Hernandez, every month we try to do something that will bring this awareness about protective orders and domestic violence. And she had the opportunity to be commissioned by a local family, and her husband had been murdered, and Mr. Ben Mustafa. And so as a result of that, she also gave us the opportunity to also have 2 additional murals aside from the one that she was commissioned to do. And really those murals are educating the public. They're anti-violence type of murals. And if you go by, you'll see on one side is "Love Is," and then the other side, it's a stop sign. It says "Stop the Violence." And so that is one way of bringing awareness to the public that violence is not acceptable. And so this was our way. Art does bring out emotion, and this was our way to bring a powerful message to the community.
Well, what's the problem? Do you have more domestic violence than we had when, like, say, in the 60s when I was a boy? Do you have, is it strictly the male's fault in these relationships? Is it just a dysfunctional marriage? Have you thought about it, or do you feel qualified to discuss what's the problem that's causing this?
There's what they call the cycle of violence, and there could be many factors involved. I mean, it could be drugs or alcohol, stress, anything of that sort, or perhaps something that they learned in the family because their parents, one of them was abusing the other. And really this one goes across the board. It can affect anybody economically. It can be, it has nothing to do with race. It could be even in same sex, it occurs, or even the man being abused. And we have represented men in seeking protective orders. So all of this, the domestic violence, the cycle of violence has 4 stages. One starts with the incident, then it escalates, and then there's a period of time where there's what we call the honeymoon stage, and then there's a calmness, and then it can happen over and over and over again unless you break it. And part of breaking that cycle is to get help, whether the abuser gets help and also the victim, get some help. The idea is not to destroy the family, but it's to assist them into solving this particular problem. I mean, nobody likes to get hurt. Or I really do believe that perhaps the abuser doesn't want to hurt this individual, but they do.
Well, it's my opinion that the abuser isn't a very, very deep-seated problem. Beyond what one could easily fix by a jail sentence or anything like that, there's something.
Yes, and as part of the domestic violence or protective orders, we also require, or we ask the court to order the abuser to go to batterer's intervention, as an example. And again, it's because, like you said, it's seated in them. Going to jail may not solve the actual problem, but a protective order is civil in nature. It becomes criminal only after you obtain the final order. But it's civil in nature, so the idea is to try to correct it or help in that situation. The there are some that do attend because they're ordered by the court to batterers intervention, but I don't have any statistical information to really share with you to see how successful it is. But I would say that if one person has helped, I think that we're doing pretty good.
I'm going to say something that is my observation that I probably shouldn't say, but my experience is as many of the men are really nothing more than bullies, and their wife is available to them. So if they could bully me, their lawyer, they'll bully me, and they'll bully anyone. It's not necessarily aimed at a woman or anyone. That's just their nature. And that's been my thoughts on it. Now, I'm sure that's not true 100% of the time. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. That's just
your observation.
Street lawyer's view of the situation. And yeah, I think there was some publicity about and I don't follow the news as closely as one might. I probably should, but I think there was a death or two related to domestic violence.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, in 2014 there was, I believe, 7. There was quite a bit. Yes,
7?
It really kind of. That's why we started this ad hoc committee to try to assist and educate the public about protective orders and try to resolve that problem somehow. But we feel like every month we have to do something in terms of education.
Do you think the problem is, I had asked before, is the problem actually worse than people of our generations saw when in the 60s or whatever? Is it the same or?
I don't have any information to compare with in the previous years, but obviously there hadn't been that many deaths as a result of domestic violence. This one was really serious. I mean, 2014 there was too many of them.
And when you refer to 7, that was in Nueces County?
Yes, Nueces County. Mm-hmm.
And are all the men? Well, I was going to ask if all the men been put up for trial or whatever. You probably didn't even follow that.
Each one was each one has its own facts. I think I don't know if all of them they committed suicide themselves, but I think one of them that person did. But it's serious. It's a serious problem.
The Batters Intervention Program, I'm not that familiar with that. I would say that many of my clients who took anger management did say that it was a benefit to them, which surprises me. These are pretty tough guys, and for them to say that, I figured, it must be that the anger management must be of some help too.
I think it's pretty similar. Obviously, the anger management is a program that is used through probation, through the criminal side, or as part of the sentence. And of course, since this being civil, this is the Batters Intervention is a program that is provided by the Women's Shelter, and it's directly to and specialized on domestic violence.
So who funds the county attorney's office? Nueces County gives you a budget, and then from the budget you get paid, and the assistant county attorneys get paid. Is that how that works?
Yes. Obviously, and the Commissioners Court is the governing body that actually is their role is really of the budget, and as a matter of fact, they're going to start the budget process, whereby they're going to hear from all the elected officials or all the department heads about what their needs are, and it includes employees, supplies, equipment, all of that nature in every department. And so they will be deciding how much to give each department or each office. And so we're looking forward to that. It's upcoming, and hopefully we'll get good results, and we'll go from there.
Go in there and beg them for some money. So look, I need more money because these young assistant county attorneys aren't staying with us.
Exactly.
Because that seems to be a problem based on my personal observation with the district attorney's office, that the district attorney's office here in Nueces County actually pays less to the assistants, which is the attorneys working for the district attorney, pays less than the small counties around. So many of them actually aggravate to Kingsville or Alice, etc.
And it's very true. I mean, I used to be a prosecutor. I used to be a chief prosecutor at the time before I became the county attorney. And there was a lot of overturn back then, and even in my department, in the civil end. And I've been pretty lucky that we've managed to keep a good staff. And there's a lot of factors involved in actually keeping a good staff. Partly is money, and the other part is morale, and of course that those are some things that you can work on. But really, what it all boils down to, they're trying to make a living just like anybody else. So yes, it is important to pay our attorneys.
Well, it could be miserable if you have a high staff turnover. Mm-hmm. When was it? I don't know how many years ago it was. I said, well, I guess I just got to pay these people more money, or I'm going to have to go out of business because I'm going to drive myself crazy. So are you the office? Mark DiCarlo makes a bond, $5,000 for whatever possession of controlled substance, and then my guy doesn't show up in court, and then he doesn't show up in court, and then you sue me. No, you do a bond forfeiture. You're the office behind that,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Oh man. So, I think you have one attorney just assigned to doing those.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, I have one attorney that actually handles that, and we also represent the board, the bail bond board, and it's the same attorney. Yes.
And so let's say that a bail bondsman instead of an attorney makes the bond for a accused, oppressed, poor individual. Just joking. Let's say the bail bondsman makes it. It's the same proceeding. In other words, it's like a civil lawsuit,
yes.
etc.
Yes, we do the same thing. Any forfeiture would be the same. We would handle it the same, whether it was the attorney that bonded out the individual or whether it was a surety. Yes.
Does that office pay for itself? I would think it collect a certain amount of money.
Yes, it does bring in money. As a matter of fact, I did bring some stats.
Here?
Yeah.
Prepare.
See, I don't know if I brought it in here. Yes, in 2014, we brought over $95,000. In 2013, we brought over $82,000.
Okay, so
so it does,
it probably pays for itself
Yes.
anyway. What about on the forfeitures? Some man is driving a truck through the middle of Corpus Christi, and he stopped, and they find marijuana and $45,000. So they sue him for the forfeiture of the $45,000, saying it was a result of drug proceeds, etc. Mm-hmm. Is your office do those?
No, the district attorney's office handles
the district attorney's
Yes.
office does those?
And that also brings back money into the office, I believe.
Yes.
And pays itself. It pays the lawyers to proceed on those cases.
And let's talk about the protective orders and all that. Let's see. I've never quite, because I don't do family law, I never quite understood the difference between the temporary restraining order and the protective order. Do you do both at your office?
Not the restraining order. That's a civil matter. That's usually brought in by civil attorneys, and is usually in a divorce situation or a divorce case. The protective orders we handle, but we do have collaboration with Rio Grande Legal Services, whereby they handle the protective orders 3 days a week, and we handle the Thursday and Friday cases that come in. But everything is funneled through my office, and what that means is that the applicant starts with our office and setting up an appointment, and then depending on whether they came in on a Monday or a Thursday, we decide whether or not we handle the case or the Rio Grande Legal Aid handles it. If for whatever reason there's a conflict, whether in our office or their office, let's say, for example, if there's a conflict with their office, or if the individual, because they have to go through some criteria to make sure that they do qualify as a client, and if they don't, then we take the case at that point. So they'll always have an opportunity to get it for free.
The protective order intake form is online.
Yes, we have it in English and in Spanish.
Applicant's information. Mm-hmm. The applicant is a person applying for the restraining order, a protective order against someone, right?
Yes, correct.
And the respondent is the name of the person you're trying to take the protective order against?
That is, he's going to have a protective order that prohibits him from certain acts, from committing family violence, from coming anywhere near them, as examples.
Any of these cases that we had last year where 7 people were killed, had there already been these kind of
And
protective orders issued?
That's a very good question. Yes, in one of them, they already had a protective order, and the other one, the latest one, they had an appointment, but they didn't show up.
You know, I even hate to broach that subject because I think a lot of times the judges could be paranoid about losing their jobs, or someone could be paranoid about losing. This is a judge who grants this protective order.
Correct.
I'm afraid that they can be paranoid about losing their job if, God forbid, something happens violent, so they might err on the side of granting too many protective orders. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, they have to be elected, etc., and that would be fair game for an opponent of theirs. Mm-hmm. That's where, and then on the other hand, I'm not even going to ask you the name of the judge who granted the protective order in that case. It resulted in the death because I think it might be a cheap shot. Mm-hmm. I don't know the facts or circumstances that
and that was a very interesting situation because she had the protective order, and a few days later, the man had lost the job, had lost everything, and he basically calculated the murder. I mean,
you're inferring that that's rare,
right?
That to be rare, they would calculate a murder. They usually do it as a crime of passion, I would assume, right?
Right. But in that situation, he also killed himself. So, but we can do the best that we can in obtaining that protective order on their behalf. But the first line of defense is calling the cops.
I hate to say this, but you know what I've talked about in my office, my secretaries and that? This is awful to say, but it's true. This is what I say. Why doesn't this guy just kill himself and then just kill yourself and don't kill, if you're going to kill yourself anyway, especially. I mean, that's a pretty raw thing to say, but sometimes...
it has occurred. Not always, but it has occurred.
Well... especially when they kill the kids. Mm-hmm. Has that happened in the last year?
No, I have not seen a case where that has occurred. Okay. At least not here.
Okay, information regarding children of this marriage relationship, other marriage relationships, court orders, and then I guess you get in. I mean, I'm assuming it's more complicated now than it used to be because now you got common law marriages. And actually... you can get a protective order, I guess, against a girlfriend or a boyfriend. It doesn't necessarily have to be a member.
If there's a dating relationship, yes. And the law just recently passed, and now we can even do it on behalf of a person that's being stalked or harassed, which that was something different than before. So the standing, or what we call standing, the relationship has now grown.
So for me to get a protective, let's say that I needed to get a protective order, and I applied to get a protective order because I was being stalked. So, would you do it, or you say, well, you're not poor enough? What's the deal?
No, we can do it. I mean, obviously, we would have to look at the facts to see if.
So there's no needs requirement. A doctor or somebody that means could get this done.
No,
right?
Correct.
And is this protective order? Is this a criminal protective order?
No, it's a civil case. At the end, when you have the final protective order, or you obtain it through the court's order, any violation of that protective order now becomes criminal. But during the period of time that, like for example, in obtaining a protective order, it's in 2 stages. The first stage is an ex parte protective order. That does not give you a violation would not be criminal at that point. But at the final stage, when you get the final protective order, then any violation of that protective order will be considered a felony. A criminal case. It would be a misdemeanor, Class A misdemeanor. And if you have 2 priors, then it would be a felony.
Okay, so I'm filling out ATF form 4473. And there's asking me these questions because I'm at a gun show and I want to buy a firearm. Mm-hmm. And then I think if you have a protective order for domestic violence, you can't buy a firearm. Is that right?
If in fact, in the protective order, if there's a finding, there will be a finding in the protective order that you don't have a firearm. or that you should not have a firearm, or prohibits you from having a firearm. That's correct.
Were these killings the last 7 years, they were all men against women?
This last year, 2014,
Yes.
they were all, yes, men
They're all
against
men
women.
against women. Did the men always use a firearm to kill their wife?
I don't recall how all of them, I think they were using a firearm. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the other questions, you believe the respondent, who's the person you're trying to get to protect, has a drug or alcohol problem, and I would assume that that's fairly common. They have a drug or alcohol problem.
I would say in some situations what we have seen, that is a factor.
And you ask about property. Do you have photos taken of your injuries? I guess, do they bring in photos very often?
They do, or if not, we take them in our office. I mean, we have the equipment to actually take photographs of whatever injuries you may have.
Does the respondent have any firearms? Does respondent have a license to carry a handgun? Yes or no? Let's assume that they have a license to carry a handgun. If that protective order is granted, then they still have to give up their handgun. Is that right?
That's correct. There would be a finding prohibiting that person from having it. Yes.
So once this is granted, this protective order is granted, they're always granted differently. You can't go near the victim. You can't go here. You can't. They're always. It's a different order regarding what is in the protective order.
There's prohibitions in the order that basically will prohibit the individual from doing certain things. You know, the usual one is not commit family violence, or don't threat them, don't use physical force against them, don't go anywhere near her job, at least 200 yards away from, you know, certain locations, the place of employment.
And if he or she goes near the applicants, you know, the person who applied for the protective order, then you call up the police, and then in theory the police will go and arrest them.
Well, if they're in the scene, and of course if the police actually sees it happening or whatever, or there's probable cause to arrest, they would arrest. Yes, but that's something that the law enforcement would have to evaluate at that point.
Okay, and then so is this in this court order for a protective order? Ordinarily, how long is it? Is it for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or?
The protective order is good for 1 year, but they can come back, and under certain we can actually get another extension. So.
Okay, and it would seem like you get so this protective order. Let's assume that I would assume that the respondent, who is often the man, who is often abusing the wife, I'm assuming that a lot of times they probably don't even show up at the hearing, do they?
Sometimes, actually, in all honesty, the great majority of the cases that we handle, they've got representation, or they
so
show
they get
up.
representation, and then they're handed this order, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, and then I guess the judge probably kind of reprimands them about what they do or don't need to do.
I can't say that for certain. I can only speculate because I'm not up there in court when it actually happens.
Okay.
But more than likely, yes, he would bring it to his attention or her attention.
Who is in court?
Mary Esther Guerra, she's one of my assistant county attorneys.
How many assistant county attorneys do you have?
We're a total of 10, including myself, so 9, and myself.
Okay, and so you have 9 county attorneys.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And I think have I heard complaints that the county is hiring too many outside litigation firms, or is that the city is hiring too many outside litigation firms, and that it should be handled more in-house, is the inferred argument that. Mm-hmm. What
in our situation, the majority of cases are handled in-house. And I'm talking about the civil cases that are brought
Mm-hmm.
against the county, whether it's in federal court or state court. Right now, pending, we have 15 cases. Only 4 of those have outside counsel. One of the things that I look at when we have a lawsuit is whether or not there's multiple parties. If there's multiple parties, I have to evaluate whether or not there's going to be, in their defense, there's going to be some kind of conflict. And therefore, one lawyer could not be representing two people if the defense is going to be conflicting. So for that reason, there has been occasions where I have asked for outside counsel in that perspective.
You have 15 lawsuits against Nueces County, right?
Correct.
Now. And most of those lawsuits are what? Prisoners' cases?
Correct.
Is that right?
Usually our cases are either employment or civil rights, prisoner cases, like you say.
Okay.
Out of those 15, 5 of them arise out of the jail. And some are employment and some in civil rights.
So employment, say that somebody says, and I think there was a lawsuit against the county that I found online wherein a man said that he was being discriminated against because he wouldn't do anything illegal in turning over evidence to, he said he had an assistant district attorney, worked for under Mark Skirka, said that he was told not to turn over evidence to, this is the basis of the lawsuit, whether it's
Correct.
true or not, we don't know. He sued the county, said that he was wrongfully terminated because he refused to turn over, because he was supposed to, he wanted to turn over evidence to the criminal defense attorney and he was forbidden from doing so.
Correct.
And that's is that an unusual suit or something like that? It sounds unusual.
Actually, this one is unusual. This
Right.
is the first time that under that theory of recovery, that this is the first time it's happened.
I like that theory there. Because it's simple, I can't do it, you can't do anything, you can't force me to do something illegal. And the new law says this. I like the theory, it's simple. Best luck to the the plaintiff's attorney, just joking. Just joking.
But of course,
I'm
it's
just
not over, and
I'm
obviously
just
there's
joking,
two
and
sides to every story.
I know, and we really don't, all I knew was what little bit I'd seen on the petition that was contained online. And a lot of these wind up, I think, is that 42 U.S.C. Section 1983? Is that what that's
Yes,
called?
but this one is not. This is under Sabine Pilot, and that's why it's only in state court. But yeah, the civil rights is usually in federal court.
And oftentimes I assume that you assert your legal rights, that you're entitled, the county's entitled to sovereign immunity, they're entitled
Correct.
to immunity, and you sued us, but you haven't overcome our immunity defense, right?
Correct.
I assume you assert that almost all the time.
Usually under the civil rights under 1983, it's the individuals, because sometimes, usually they sue the governmental entity and then they sue the individual officer. And the individual officers are the ones that are going to be asserting their qualified immunity. Basically, it's kind of the same, but it's now under the individual. But yes, the immunities are usually raised in those cases, 1983 cases. The state court kind of cases, which are the torts, that's if somebody got hurt and we were driving a vehicle, a government vehicle, that under the tort claims, they basically are allowed to sue us for damages under that lawsuit, but there's a cap.
250,000 is
I
it?
believe so.
So if somebody gets killed in Nueces County Jail, and let's assume that it's proved to be negligence by the county, I think it's capped at 250,000, but there is a cap, we know that.
Depending if in fact it falls under the tort claims, because we had to have been using the equipment, motorized equipment, and if it's not, then they can't sue us. I mean, they'll bring the lawsuit on it, but it's usually going to be the prisoner case under civil rights under 1983, Section 1983. Usually that in a death situation, that's usually going to be the case.
Do we have any, I would assume that all these cases that they had, say, in Baltimore recently, there's going to be a fair number of civil rights suits going back
Yes,
and forth.
Definitely.
I'm assuming that they're set up under the same kind of county, district attorney, et cetera. Well, but the county attorney there is going to be busy with various
I'm pretty
cases,
sure. I'm
right?
pretty sure, yes.
Do we have anything that is common to this part of the country that you handle that may not be handled elsewhere? Anything about immigration or anything like that?
No.
Like let's say you have nothing.
No.
I mean, I could see when we do get some illegals. I don't know if they sue or you don't have anything to do with detention centers or anything like that. Is that right?
No, that's correct.
And what about the elderly? Is there any protection under your office for the elderly, or could somebody file a protective order for their protection as well?
Yes, we have done. I think those are rare, but we have done. I think we had one situation where it was an elderly man, and in another situation where it was an elderly woman. We don't see those that often, but yes, they do come through us. On the other side of the protection of the adults or the child protective, we represent the child protective services where they have the two divisions, one for the children and one for the adults. And we haven't seen any of those cases, but there is a governmental entity that handles those kind of cases as well for their protection.
Yeah, those could be very complicated because a lot of times the elderly don't have the contacts, et cetera. You mentioned Child Protective Services, so do you represent, because they changed the name a bunch of times.
Yes.
Is it Child Protective, what is it now?
Texas Regulatory and Child Protection Services, I believe. I'm still of the old, so I have a hard time remembering it, but let's just call it Child Protective Services. Okay. That's a state agency. It's the same agency. They just changed it.
If a neighbor makes a complaint that a next door neighbor child is being abused, then Child Protective Services may go investigate it, or the police go investigate it, and if they find some sort of a case, then it's some sort of TRO or some temporary restraining order or something is filed by the county attorney, or how do you handle it?
That's correct. We filed the suit on their behalf. It's a suit affecting parent-child relationship with a protection order for the child, and usually we get the order before they go out and remove the child from the environment.
Last year, there's something called legally speaking, it's called the termination of the parent-child relationship, which means that you basically have taken the child away from the parents, and they have no legal right. The child away from the parents, and the parents have no legal right to keep the child, or maybe even to visit the child. How many of those did you do last year? Terminations? Did you know?
I don't have.
Just generally. Did you do a lot of them?
We have done quite a bit.
You have done quite a bit of them.
Yes, quite a bit. And what happens, we have 2 years in order to pursue a termination case. But what we see, a great majority of the cases that we handle on their behalf are neglect, and it's all tied into drugs. And we don't see a lot of reunification because they're not
fit.
Yeah.
Because they're using drugs.
Right.
So, ordinarily, in a termination case, the parents are entitled to a free attorney. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And last year, approximately how many termination of parent-child relationship lawsuits that the county attorney filed, how many of them went to jury trial, do you think?
A great majority of them are jury trial. Very few are before the court, but a great majority go to trial.
Do any of these, I assume a certain percentage of the parents agree to give up the rights to their children?
We don't see those very often.
Okay. So
they usually are they're all trials.
I would assume that these parents a lot of times are indigent, they're getting a court-appointed attorney to represent their interests.
That's correct.
And I'm assuming that these trials, I'm just guessing, based upon medical records, personal relationships, number of witnesses, that this would be a big deal 2-week trial. Is that right?
It lasts.
I mean, that's what I would think.
Some of the depending on whether or not how many children are involved, and obviously parents of the child, right? So there's numerous lawyers. Will depend on the length of the trial, but what I see most of the time is about 4 days, 4 to 5 days.
4 to 5 day trial.
Yes. On a simple, 2-parent type of case.
Mm-hmm. Well, still, that's fairly lengthy. I guess maybe that's the average length of a murder trial or something.
Correct.
So 4 to 5 days, and it's it's held in district court, I would assume.
It's
12
held
jurors?
it's held, yes. Well, but it's held at the Court 5, County Court of Law number 5. It's special. It's a specialized case. It's a specialized court that handles
County Court
it.
number 5.
Correct.
And is it 12 jurors or 6 jurors? Do you know?
I think it's 12.
Okay, I think it's 12, but it's kind
12.
of funny because it's a county, it's. I've heard that there's a big burnout. How many lawyers are in charge of doing those termination cases?
I have 2 attorneys that do that for full time, and then of course we have the chief, and sometimes I get involved as well, but mostly 2. But they're very special attorneys. It really takes a very special attorney to do this type of cases, because you're right, it does. There's
I hear they have a high burnout rate.
Yes.
But they can only stand it because of the terrible things they see done against the children. It bothers them.
Exactly. So I'm very proud of them, and obviously I'm always giving them an opportunity to do something else, but they really love it. They love what they're doing.
Well, that's interesting, and they've been with you for a while then.
Yes. One of them has been with me less time, but Jerry DeLesio, he's been with me a long time.
And I see something here about a peace bond.
Oh yes, that's handled at the Justice Court, and that's usually it's in situations of neighbors, that kind of thing. Anybody that is threatening to hurt somebody else, and what it is that they go before the Justice of the Peace and they issue a bond, and if they violate that, then they forfeit that bond. But it's usually at a situation where you don't have standing to proceed on a protective order. It's usually another avenue that perhaps they can get some help in terms of dealing with
So if you're having problems with a neighbor, continual problems with a neighbor, you could get a peace bond against them through your office.
Not my office, through the Justice Court, through what we call JP Court.
I see.
And usually those are, I'm not sure if the district attorney actually does those cases, but it is in that particular court.
The reason I was asking was on your chart, I guess, and I guess you're trying to simplify on your chart, on your website, trying to simplify the various the difference between protective orders, magistrate emergency orders for protection, restraining orders, and peace bonds. You're trying to simplify that on your website. It's still kind of complicated. Even for me, I forget.
It is. It's kind of like a cheat sheet, and it gives, that's one of the main questions that we sometimes get from individuals, or when we're doing some education out in the public, is they always, when they talk about protective orders, they use the word restraining order. I want a restraining order, or even at the JP level where it's a peace bond, they still say restraining order. So the individuals, they don't know the actual terminology, but there is a difference in all these different ones, the restraining order, peace bond, protective order, magistrate protective order.
So I see all these attorney general opinions online. Mm-hmm. What are you trying to do there? Here, February 13th, 2015. Dear Ms. Jimenez, you asked whether certain information is subject to required public disclosure under the Public Information Act. Yes. Oasis County Clerk's Office received a request for 9 categories of information pertaining to provisional ballots cast in the 2014 election. What was that about? Could you say?
There's, I don't know that particular one, but what you're referring to is public information request.
Yeah.
And under the law, there's a process in place that if the governmental entity wants to not disclose a certain part of the information that is being requested, then we have to go through the process of the attorney generals, and we have to say under what exceptions it exempts it from disclosure, and we have to submit a brief regarding that, and then the AG will decide whether or not they agree with us or not, and then they'll say, do not disclose this piece of document or these documents.
What would be an example of something that you wouldn't want to disclose? to the public under an information request? What would be an example?
What we see a lot is obviously in purchasing or expending money, government, public funds. We go through a bidding process, and usually there's other competing interests by different vendors where they have to give us information of their trade secrets or something along those lines. So that would be something that is not uncommon, where that would be excluded. However, you still have to go through that process. But in that particular case, since it's a third party, they would have to be making those requests for exempting and not disclosing. But we still have to go through that process. So that would be an example.
And if I want information, let's say that I want a list of all the employees of the county attorney's office and how much they're making. That's probably public record already.
Yes, that would be public, and I think they may have that online.
I believe that probably
the
is.
County auditor. But you always start off with the premise that all documents are public, unless there's something within that document that is an exemption that prohibits it from being disclosed. But there's two kinds of exceptions. The one exception is mandatory, which means that if it's confidential by law, that's not disclosed. If it's discretionary, then it would be up to the governmental entity whether or not they would decide to go ahead and release that information or not. But it's still an exemption.
I guess I was distracted for a second. So
Okay.
If you file a request, you go by the insinuation that everything is public, and then why would you make a decision that it's not? Obviously, if it's proprietary from a vendor or something, you wouldn't want to release that, right?
Correct. That would be confidential.
And if you don't want to reveal it, then you ask for an opinion from the Texas Attorney General.
Correct, and that's why you saw a lot of those.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, in terms of public information requests, I've got some numbers, or I thought I had some numbers. In 2013, we sent up 145, or at least we had 105. I'm sorry, we didn't send those up. We had 145 requests.
Mm-hmm.
In 2014, we had 141 requests. So we do get a lot. I think I'm going to start recording how many are released or not, or I don't have those kind of numbers. I thought I had those numbers.
There was like 145 open records requests.
Correct.
And you don't know how much of it was released versus how much it was brought up to the Attorney General.
Correct.
And the Attorney General issues an opinion, and a lot of times they make you issue the information, and sometimes they don't, I guess.
Oh, they may agree with us, and they may say you'll have to redact certain portions of the document, and so that's what we do, or the complete document is excluded.
Let's say it's 1,000 pages that you'd have to respond to. Do you get to charge me 10 cents a copy or something?
Yes. 10 cents a copy.
It's 10 cents a copy? Exactly.
10 cents a copy. Yes, 10 cents a copy plus labor if it's over 50 pages.
I hate to say this, but I bet you get a lot of requests from the same people. There's certain people that are like gadflies, and I don't mind that, but some of them are kind of, some of them got problems, I think, and they just want to harass and ask these questions, right? And that could wind up costing a lot of money because they, they're persistent,
Correct. I haven't seen that.
No, you haven't? Well, that's good.
In a long time, I haven't.
Okay.
We've had those where they consistently ask for the same thing, and it's usually tied in for one particular that I remember, and I don't remember the name, but it was a father of this kid that was in our jail, and so he was like on it. Constantly, and what he was asking was voluminous. It was not like one page. It was like voluminous. But then once he got and he understood that we were not hiding anything, then he backed off and he didn't do it anymore. But I haven't seen one of those situations in a long time.
What does the county attorney's office have to do with an Oasis County jail, other than I guess you defend any kind of civil rights actions, et cetera, against the jail,
Correct.
right? And I saw over there's a bunch of stuff. ADA compliance now. They have these sheets in the jail all over. And I think it has to do, didn't the state come in and say that the jail wasn't in ADA compliance or something? Something about, and then there was some sort of, and then it was alleged that it was political, something like that.
We just entered, or the county just entered into a settlement agreement with the DOJ, the Department of Justice, regarding ADA compliance. And there's certain things that we have to do within that contract. A lot of it is educating and letting the public know, but a lot of it has to do with, like, for example, the IT department. That one is going to have to be upgraded.
What's IT?
Information technology. The website, the web pages, that kind of thing. That has to be accessible to those that have disabilities. So there's certain things that we had to work on in that perspective. And with regards to the jail, we are doing some renovations, and they all have to be ADA compliant. So pretty much that part was not bad, but we are doing some new dormitories, so that also has to be ADA compliant, and of course they also have to be in compliance with jail standards as well. So there's some work to be done.
Oh yeah. So I know that if you go into the jail, they ask the guys a list of questions. Have you ever committed suicide? Are you on drugs and all that sort of thing, right? Do you have anything to do with that list, or do you help? You said, look, you need to ask them this so they don't go killing themselves.
That was created a while back, and basically it's a screening, and obviously the sheriff has a responsibility of making sure that they are provided any medical care or any mental care if they need it. And so the county does have a contract with an outside vendor, NAFCare, to provide medical services, and that's part of it, the screening. So they got to know whether or not they're ill, and so that they can address it.
Right, and I'm guessing, without any knowledge of this, that the percentage, like the men, it was mostly men in that jail, I assume.
They've got women in there too.
They do, but I would guess that a lot of them do have medical problems, because that sort of individual is maybe more dysfunctional and might have more medical problems than the average citizen. So I assume that, I think you have a nurse on duty. They have a nurse on duty over there, right?
Yes, they've got nurses, more than one. Yes, on duty. Yes.
And then there's this issue too that occurs, that they don't want to give them the medication, and you may not be qualified to talk about this, but they don't want to give them the medication that they have to give them new medication. Are you familiar with that?
Under the law, when they're providing medical care and they're providing the pharmaceutical, it's up to the doctor, and it may not be the same kind of medication,
right,
but it addresses the same medical condition. So under the law, they can do that. But sometimes the inmate doesn't know that, and so they're concerned about that. So
you're a Republican, a Democrat?
Oh, I'm a Democrat.
And are you up for election again?
Yes, in 2016.
2016. This is May of 2015. And do you have any opponents yet?
No.
Are you scared? Because sometimes, these elections are schizophrenic. 1 year, the Republicans will win everything, right? And then 4 years later, the Democrats will win it, right? So maybe the next cycle will be back to the Democrats, because the last one was pretty much a big Republican sweep here in Nueces County.
It was. And actually, in all honesty, my job and what I concentrate on is doing a good job. And so obviously I don't take anything for granted, and I'm working hard and getting reelected. And so, it'll be... Do
you have to raise a lot of money for the election? Like, I want to raise like last time, you haven't had an opponent in a while, have you?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay. So you can't intelligently state that so many years ago that you had to raise $50,000 or anything. It's just going to be...
I think initially that's about how much I raised back when. But I think the races have become more expensive because obviously they want to win, and so they're spending a lot of money.
When you got a problem in Nueces County, there's a firm they hire out of Austin. I don't know the name of the firm. And they're expert at dirty laundry. Mm-hmm. And they'll look at somebody's record, and then they'll get a case, whatever it was, how a judge ruled on a domestic abuse case, and then they'll do this elaborate commercial. This judge did this, and right, and I think you've got to pay that firm. I think it's one particular firm. You pay them a lot of money. I think they have a high success rate at that. In other words, you have a lengthy record.
Yes.
And anything could be taken out of context.
Correct.
Or even a mistake, and then, they could make this big commercial. And
that's correct.
You paranoid about that? I'm just teasing. Because I could see it happen. I could see that anybody.
It has happened. I mean, not to me, but I've seen it
happen here locally.
You're absolutely correct. But
and
in my
sometimes
world,
I think, yeah, that's a cheap shot that other opponent is doing.
Agree. I agree, but it is what it is, and I'm
ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
Ready to take it?
I'm ready to go.
And what would you think? What are why should people vote? I usually don't do this, but we have 4 minutes left.
Yeah.
Real quick, why would I vote for Laura Garza Jimenez? Why should I vote for you?
Well, I've got
pull the handle. Right, it used to be pull the handle. Why should we vote?
I've been in office for many years now, and I've been under several administrations, both Republican and Democrat. And my goal has always been to provide the best legal advice and the best legal representation. And I've been pretty successful, and I want to continue that this next term. And so if you want somebody that is going to do a good job and has experience, that's me, Laura Garza Jimenez.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
As always, Ms. Jimenez, it's been a couple of years.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Good night.